In 1936, an American archaeologist discovered a golden statue about a foot tall in an ancient Peruvian temple deep in the rainforest. And then, in an act of international criminality, a French archaeologist stole it and took it back to Europe. This set off a spate of events in 1936 that is almost unbelievable. When the American archaeologist made it back to the States, he was immediately visited by two Army intelligence officers that disclosed to him that the Nazi troops were excavating a site in Egypt, trying to discover the lost Ark of the Covenant, which would give them the power to win all battles. Bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Yeah, that's Raiders of the Lost Ark. And oh, what a great movie it was. June 1981. That movie came out by Steven Spielberg and with Harrison Ford, and it created a sense of adventure, seeking this lost Ark of the Covenant, and it was comedy. And if you were sitting in a theater, the sort of laughs and shouts that took place, it had an energy, and part of the energy was based on the song, bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Wait, you can do it better. Do it. Yeah. All right, all right. So we have before us an ancient text that mentions the Ark of the Covenant. So I'm going to put on a fedora. I'm going to hold on to a bullwhip. And we're going to excavate this passage together. This goes back almost 3,000 years in now a lost temple. And we read when Solomon dedicates this new temple, the Ark of the Covenant finally arrives. So let's excavate this passage. You have it in your hand. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the ancestral houses of the Israelites, all before King Solomon in Jerusalem to bring up the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, for hundreds upon hundreds of years, had been traveling around. Do you remember the Ark of the Covenant? In Hebrew, ark, it can mean a big boat like Noah's Ark, or that word can mean a chest, a rectangular chest. And it had become a sort of mobile altar. Do you remember? The ancient Hebrews carried it with them wherever they traveled through the desert. During the Exodus, they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And do you remember they carried it around the walls of Jericho in the Battle of Jericho? They believed it could bring them victory. It was their mobile throne of God. And now it's landing in the Jerusalem temple. Do you remember what was in the ark? Do you remember? It was thought to contain the 2 stone tablets that God gave Moses, the 10 Commandments, on Mount Sinai. Oh, filled with spiritual relics of amazing power. Do you remember what else was in the ark? It was said to contain Aaron's rod. Aaron's rod. When Moses and Aaron came to the Pharaoh and said, "Set my people free." They were trying to set the Hebrews free. Do you remember that Aaron, in a show of divine power, threw his rod onto the ground and it became a snake? Do you remember that? And then do you remember the court magicians? They also had these rods. They threw them down and they became snakes too. But then Aaron's rod, or Aaron's snake, ate the other snakes. Do you remember this? Actually, do you remember that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark when he falls into the snake pit? Oh. So, in the ark essentially is a magic wand. Now Harry Potter meets Raiders of the Lost Ark. Do you remember what else is in the Ark of the Covenant? It was said to contain Manna. The bread from heaven. The bread that came down when the Hebrews were starving in the desert. The bread from heaven, manna. Now by this point, it would be really stale manna, but manna nonetheless. So this Ark of the Covenant now arrives. Let's keep excavating this passage. Bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Then the priests brought the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple or house, in the most holy place, underneath the wings of the cherubim or cherubim. So, in the temple in Jerusalem, Solomon had just built it. The inner chamber was called the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could enter this sacred spot. And now they bring the Ark of the Covenant and set it in its place. Under the wings of the cherubim. Do you remember what a cherubim was? It's one of the sort of archangels in Hebrew spirituality. It was the angels that guarded the place wherever you were about to enter the heavenly realm or a sacred spot. They guarded the entrance. Like they were at the entrance to the Garden of Eden in Genesis, the cherubim. Do you remember what they look like? They're these fearsome, supernatural creatures. They're sort of a hybrid creature. They'll have like a lion's head and maybe a rhino's body and giraffe feet and wings, or maybe a rhino's head and a bear body. I mean, all these hybrid creatures, and they were fearsome. So they weren't fat little babies with wings. So you know the cherubs of Renaissance art, it's always these cute little fat, not as cute as Baylor, but cute little babies with wings. Angels in the Bible are either one or another thing. They're either these fearsome creatures or they look just like anybody else. In the Bible, there's never these cute little babies with wings flying around. They're these fearsome creatures or they just look like anyone. Oh, be alert to entertaining angels unaware. They could be in our midst right now. Any person that is bringing a divine light, an angelic hope, look for angels in your life. So the Ark of the Covenant is brought, set under the wing. There were considered to be two massive statues of the cherubim in the Holy of Holies, made out of olive wood, and these massive wings spread out. The Ark has landed. Let's keep excavating this passage. Bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in the presence of all the assembly of God. And he spread out his hands to heaven, and he said, O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth beneath. You are our Lord God, keeping covenant and steadfast love for all your servants. Fulfill this day, therefore, Lord, O God of Israel. Okay, right here, he has spoken the word G-O-D, God. But remember with me, that's not actually the word Solomon would have been saying. Remember, God is an English word, and the word G-O-D is nowhere in our Bible, actually. It's when we translate the Bible into English, we put that G-O-D English word in here. It's not in the Hebrew or Greek. And remember that the word God is kind of a recent invention. The English language itself is not very ancient, but the first time we can find that G-O-D word in history is from a 7th century codex that was discovered, a handwritten Bible in English, the first one we could discover, and suddenly G-O-D was there, that English word. It comes from the Proto-Germanic word Gudon, and this codex was discovered in the right, bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Oh, we're excavating this. Now, the word Solomon actually says is a Hebrew word. He says Elohim. We put the God word in there. But he says Elohim. And that is this amazing, mysterious, ancient Jewish word for the whole divine realm. They believed the spiritual dimension was populated by many different entities and beings. That's all the Elohim. But it also could be used to refer to the Most High God, Elohim. Oh, the mystery and power to this word. But we take this little English word, God, we put it there. And the problem is when you say God in English, it sounds like you're meaning some dude sitting over there or some dude sitting up on a cloud. When we say God in English syntax, it sounds like you're talking about something alongside other things. But God, we know, is infinite. Our true God is not an object in the universe, but we use this little word, and it sounds like we're referring to something that's in the universe. Our God is infinite, mysterious. Elohim. Bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Did you notice something? I skipped a part of the passage in your hand. Did you notice that the priests of the Lord brought it into that inner sanctuary, but then did you notice right after that a cloud filled the temple? A cloud filled the house of the Lord so that the priests could not even minister because the glory of the Lord filled the whole temple. Did you see that in your passage? So when I was a young minister, I thought all these supernatural events in the Bible, I just thought, those are just exaggerations. When I was a young minister, I thought every time something supernatural took place, I thought, oh, that's a metaphor. Or I would say that's a symbol or a poetic hyperbole. I'm very different now. Now as I get older and older and older, I'm much more open to supernormal events. I'm much more open to the idea that there's very little we actually know about the full scope of reality. And there's plenty of room for events that are beyond our simple understanding. I mean, you never actually directly experience reality. Your brain is sitting in a dark cave. It's in a dark cave of its cranium. You never actually see anything. Your eye turns what it receives into electrical signals that's sent to a brain that's sitting in a dark cave, and then you create the world. You never actually touch anything. You create electrical signals that are sent to your brain that reconstructs that experience. And so some philosophers believe that you're not seeing reality as it is at all, but that and evolution has created this. You are a bipedal hominid that must navigate this physical realm, so it's creating a vision that you can navigate physically. It's not what is really out there. One physicist said, you would be foolish to think the reality you experience is actually reality. I'm much more open to supernatural events. I just took over being the host of a Saturday morning radio show on KLIN, and my first guest was our own professor of physics, Dr. Gay, and I was talking to him about the kind of weird subatomic world, and he's performing experiments right now, firing electrons through gold foil, and he's doing the math that electrons seem like they have size and mass and angular momentum, but once you keep doing the math, there's no there. They become a geometric point that don't even have size and mass, and how can that be? And in the subatomic world, things get so weird. One electron on one side of the universe can be entangled and affect another electron on the other side of the universe. And with these subatomic particles, are they really there until you observe them? Because you can't determine a position until you observe them. Reality is far stranger than we might imagine. Oh, I'm open now to the supernormal taking place. I've had mystical experiences. Many people I talk to have had spiritual experiences. And so, my friends, when we come to church, this numinous cloud, this presence of the glory of God, I think it can happen. People have told me when they're sitting in the pew that they've experienced something, not from the sermon, but from from this togetherness, being in the temple in God's Spirit. I've heard people say their lives were changed, that the numinous became present. Oh, you should have the expectation that the temple could be filled with the glory of God. Let's keep excavating this passage. Bum-ba-dum-bum, bum-ba-dum. Oh. Did you see, near the end of the passage, King Solomon is saying, "Oh God, you've promised that there should never fail to have a successor before me sit on the throne of Israel." So this is back in the glory days of Israel, when it was a united monarchy. Oh, it's poignant to think of the golden age of Israel in our complex, violent times of peril. But this is back when they were united, and Solomon is saying that it is you, God, that will ensure that there'll always be someone on the throne of Israel, the nation of Israel. This sounds a little like ancient Jewish nationalism. And you know, there's a lot of concern these days about Christian nationalism, that if we begin to merge, a democracy like ours must keep a separation of church and state, but if we begin to merge the idea that we are somehow a Christian nation, we're a pluralistic nation, a nation of many Christians, and Christians should have a voice in the public square, but people that want to merge religion so much with our government that we believe it becomes almost a theocracy. Many people are worried about Christian nationalism. Is this what Solomon is proposing, that God will take control of our nation? Well, we try to control God all the time, make God suit our purposes and our designs, use God for our purposes. No. We're to align our hearts with God, not the other way around. And then Solomon says something so terribly wise. He deconstructs any notion of nationalism in this last, most beautiful sentence. He says, "But will God indeed dwell on earth? No. Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain God, much less this temple we have just built." So he makes it clear that God is beyond our control, beyond any one nation, the infinite God. And so then, in the 6th century BC, the Babylonians destroy this beautiful temple we're reading about. And the Ark of the Covenant is lost for all time. We now have no idea. You could make another movie now. We have no idea where it is or what happened to it. That temple was destroyed. They built another. And when Jesus was born, it was called Second Temple Judaism, because there was now a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. And that was the holy place where all faithful Jews considered God was present. They worshiped there. It was a temple-based religion. And then in 70 AD, the Romans came and destroyed the temple in Jerusalem once and for all. And something amazing happened. The very idea of religion evolved. Instead of it being temple-based, one spot where God is contained, Judaism then moved forth that wherever people gathered in faith becomes the temple. Wherever and whenever faithful people gather to worship God, that is the Holy of Holies. No longer is it temple-based. It becomes community-based, human-based. So we're in the temple right now. And we are in the Holy of Holies because you've come to set your heart towards God. Okay, let me set Raiders of a Lost Ark aside completely. We also come together because there's pain in life. There's difficulties. And we can trust that there's a God who cares. We create a bridge over troubled waters. We gather with compassion and hope.